20 years have passed since the barbarian Beholgar has returned to his birthland. A letter from his former village elder has pleaded for Beholgar's aid. The evil sorcerer Hagma has returned, and his dark armies threaten the lands. As the barbarian rows across the deep lake toward his old home, the mists clear to reveal an ominous tower piercing the sky in the horizon. Hagma's stronghold. With burning contempt and renewed vigor, the barbarian rows faster toward the shore. I don't know why I played Beholgar. No, I know why I played it. Because I'm a sucker for barbarian games. I like barbarians because they're just massive hulks devoid of wisdom and know nothing but swing their sword around. And I like that kind of simplicity. Seems like an undemanding life. You know, when you're not decapitating death cults and stuff, which is exactly what I'd be doing as a barbarian. No, what I meant to say is, I don't know why I finished Beholgar. It's an unpolished mess, rife with grammatical errors, frame rate dips, and game-breaking bugs that forced me to restart my console on numerous occasions, even though that didn't always fix things. But I persevered. Because I'm a masochist? No, because that's what a barbarian would do. Did Conan resign to his fate as a slave? No. Did Conan give in when he was forced to be a gladiator? No. Did Conan keel over when Thulsa Doom crucified him on the Tree of Woe? No! I may not have the barbarian physique, but I have their spirit, their tenacity, their pride. And so I met Beholgar's torture with an iron will, and though it almost broke me, I claimed my victory from the jaws of death. And what did I learn from the riddle of stealing my sanity with their broken game? I learned that Beholgar is okay. It's fine. It's a short Metroidvania equivalent to junk food. MV fans who look fondly back at NES and Genesis games might find some enjoyment here, but casual players are better off literally playing anything else. Grant me your ear as I dive into the janky world of Beholgar, and if you do not listen,
then the hell with you.
I know my intro really didn't paint Beholgar in a good light, but I did actually enjoy this game, despite its copious flaws. And it wasn't because it was a great Metroidvania, it's because it's so campy. You've probably heard the word campy before and associate it with wackiness, but I want to make sure you know what I mean when I use campy. When I call something campy, what I mean is that there's a pervading passion and sincerity in everything the work does, but it's all done ineptly, thus creating an unintentional sense of wackiness. Take Tommy Wiseau's infamous cult classic, The Room. I don't think anybody would deny that there's deep passion and sincerity that went into creating that movie. But I also don't think anyone would deny that almost everything it tried was executed poorly. The stilted writing, the overlong establishing shots, the over-the-top acting that's somehow simultaneously under the top.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
People like campy works because we can connect with that passion, even if the finished product is less than great. Much like how people love a good underdog story. This person or team had a vision or message they were passionate about and did everything they could to get it out to the public. Quality be damned. That's how I feel about Beholgar. The devs wanted to recreate something from gaming's past, and though they lacked the technical prowess or polish to make something excellent, they at least shot for the moon and landed among the stars. Or at least some kind of debris floating in space. Point is, yeah, the game isn't the greatest, but I liked it anyway. To explain this, let's start with the broken combat. Okay, maybe calling the combat broken is a bit of an exaggeration, but there were times when it certainly was broken, mainly when it came to taking damage. There were times I killed a lunging enemy only to still take damage, as if their ghost got revenge. And maybe that is what happened, I don't know, I didn't read up on all of Beholgar's lore. Anyway, combat, by and large, is simple, just the way it ought to be. Beholgar swings his sword around to turn monsters into bloody explosions. And there are all kinds of sub-weapons your barbarian can use, and they operate much like they do in traditional Castlevania games. You pick up the axe icon, and then you're able to throw as many axes in an arc as your limited ammo allows. Ammo can be replenished from enemy drops or from smashing jars and stuff. Again, simple. Some sub-weapons are better than others. Of course, the axe is awesome, and the javelins have great range. But then there's this glaive you throw that just sucks. Anyone remember the movie Krull? I liked that movie. That dude could control the glaive after he threw it. Not Beholgar. All Beholgar knows is swing around sword. Well, that's not entirely true. Beholgar also has a dodge roll with no iframes. You have to purchase a ring if you want your dodge to actually dodge, of course. And Beholgar can swing around other weapons too, like spears and axes. You can cycle through these with the press of a button, though there's really no need to. Each weapon comes with a strength and a speed stat, and every weapon you find is better than the last. But Beholgar's most effective weapon is his rage. He has a rage meter below his HP that fills upon killing enemies. And when it's full, and only when it's full, can you do your rage moves, like hurling a deadly fireball across the screen or performing a ground pound, which is an ability you need in order to gain access to some areas, so it sucks when you can't use it because your rage meter is half a centimeter away from being full. As for his other abilities, he can find gauntlets that let him grab edges and boots that grant double jump. But the cool ability he gets, pun totally intended, is the ability to create ice blocks for impromptu mid-air platforms. That's actually a pretty sweet ability and led to some fun platforming and rewarding moments of exploration. Finishing off combat, let's talk enemies and bosses. The enemy AI sucks, which turned out to be funny in most cases. The enemy designs are generic but look good, and there's a nice variety. You got ghouls, goblins, other barbarians, skeletons, your typical fantasy game fare. I felt like there was a lot of unfair scenarios with these enemies, like a certain platforming part with mermaids who spit at you mid-air to knock you into insta-kill pits, or any platforming section that involved those poisonous flying ghost enemies. Poison in this game sucked and killed me on many occasions, often with hilarious results. The bosses were fine. A couple of big dudes you just slide through, a djinn who needs to work on his cardio because he can't get his fat ass off his throne for more than a few attacks, and a giant snake, which totally kicked my ass a bunch. It was probably the best fight in the game, next to the final fight with Hagma. All in all, the bosses were a mixed bag. Nothing offensive, but nothing great either. There's not a whole lot to say about progression in Beholgar. There's no leveling, no gear beyond the 5 weapons you can find, only like 3 bottles to find that increases your max HP, maybe 4 upgrades to increase max subweapon ammo, and any sort of upgrade you get from purchasing rings is lost to the ether. I honestly can't even remember what most of the rings do anymore, and I steadfastly refuse to do any research for this game. Essentially, you collect gold from fallen enemies and broken pots and exchange this currency for goods and services. I love me a healthy MV economy. You all know this. The big ticket items you can purchase are rings, and each ring gives you an ability, like the aforementioned iframes for dodge rolls or currency magnetism. And getting these rings can be a pain because they're super expensive and you lose gold whenever you die without being given the chance to get it back like in Shovel Knight or with like corpse running. But the real problem is this. See that section in the menu with nothing in it? I presume that's where the rings go, but they never appeared there. So I never knew what rings I had, nor did I have the option to review what each ring did. It was painful, and looking at that empty gap still hurts to this day. Moving along. Exploration in Beholgar was done well enough. You start off in a town that really doesn't have that much to do in it other than give you a shop and a couple of side quests, and then you're off on your little linear adventure. The world isn't very open, but there's lots of distractions and alternate paths that require you to backtrack once you unlock abilities, and these diversions are usually fruitful, netting you some stat increases but mostly giving you more gold for you to lose because you suck and die a lot. There's no in-game map, so that sucks hard. Thankfully, the world's pretty small, so it wasn't that big of a deal. The game tantalizes you a lot with chests and paths just out of reach, and I like that in a Metroidvania. They also tease you early on with a really rad entrance to a biome called the Snake Palace. I love when MVs tease me with an imposing locked door, and the earlier they do it, the better. Keeps me motivated. The biomes in general were decent. They weren't great, but they were what I expected in a barbarian-centric fantasy game. Forests, caves, palaces, dungeons, snow areas, fire areas. The Snake Palace was the only biome worth note, and even it didn't add anything new mechanically to the game. It just looked different compared to everything else. And the way the world connected was interesting. There was no looping into itself, but entrances to new biomes were usually hidden or at least not where I'd expect them to be. It felt great finding where to go next. But what didn't feel great was the game's fast travel system. I'll always appreciate fast travel in a Metroidvania, but not when it's as much of a hindrance as actual backtracking, and when it's broken. It's hard to describe the fast travel's near uselessness. You have these little campsites scattered throughout the biomes that serve as your save points. Each site gives you the option to fast travel to different biomes, but you can't choose which campsite you want to travel to. It just sends you to the beginning of the biome where literally no points of interest exist. So you'll be hoofing it a lot when you backtrack. and sometimes it's better to hoof it because the fast travel is seriously broken. I couldn't travel to Jabbar's palace because my game would break. This persisted even after shutting down my console, so I said f it and just stopped traveling there, which sucked because then I always had this sense of dread swell in my stomach every time I wanted to fast travel. Another thing that hurts to think about to this day. Beholgar's atmosphere is probably my favorite part of the game. The devs did a great job recreating that old NES and Genesis feeling, jank and all. The muted earth tones fit well with the 80s fantasy tone they were going for, and the music actually kicked a lot of ass. It's not like I'm going to make a Beholgar playlist on Spotify or anything, but I genuinely got pumped at the title screen. The music's hard percussions, the upbeat and triumphant melody that harkened to the beginning of a grand adventure, the dragon casually soaring by, the epic camera pan to show off the scenery, that skeleton in the corner that Beholgar just doesn't seem to mind being there, Beholgar himself, with his bulging muscles, thick thighs, and jet black hair flowing in the wind. Huh? What? My wife felt it necessary to interrupt me so she could inform me how gay I sounded from the other room. So, to my gay audience, you're welcome. Seriously though, there's something about this music. I don't know how to explain it, but it's very Sega Genesis. It's muddy at times with compressed, harsh notes that transport me back to the times when I had the Sega channel. Yup, I'm old. Last up's the game's narrative. It works insofar that it's a vehicle to get the player from the beginning of the game to the end semi-coherently. You know why you're there, you know what you need to do, you know how to do it, and you know what the stakes are if you don't do it. That's really the bare minimum that any video game story needs. And to that end, Beholgar's successful. Where it really drops the ball is with its everything else. Grammar's terrible, the localization's bad, sometimes sentences just aren't complete, like the text just ends halfway through, so you have no idea what was even supposed to be said. It's just bad. Worse yet, there's not even a true ending. You reach Hagma, swing your sword around, and the game ends. The actual ending's just a still frame with bad grammar. It's as disappointing as it is gloriously campy. And if you're down with the camp like I am, it won't be an issue for you either. And there's a lot more camp in the game than I've shown thus far. My favorite thing is how Beholgar can't touch water, and if he does, he explodes into a bloody pulp. Like, why would that even happen? I get that the dev didn't want to make underwater levels or something, but couldn't they at least make another death animation that at least made sense? Evidently not, and I love it. As I already mentioned in the intro, Beholgar is MV junk food. It's not going to sustain you, but it at least tastes good to the right person. It has a less than 4-hour runtime and has some rewarding and interesting exploration. Combat's mid, and platforming can be hit or miss, considering the game's plethora of bugs, but I actually had a fun time with this one. Granted, I have a high tolerance for bad Metroidvanias, but the camp and the atmosphere was enough for me to see it to the end, even if it was a little painful at times with its shoddy fast travel and poor localization. Would I recommend Beholgar? No way. I'd only recommend it to hardcore MV fans who need to kill a few hours before a root canal. Have the real pain of playing Beholgar dull the comparatively weak orthodontic pain they're about to endure. Again, there's fun to be had here, but the niche this game fills is so narrow, it's tough to know who would dig it and who wouldn't. Did you grow up playing the NES and Genesis? If so, then there's a chance you might enjoy this game because it brings back some of those nice nostalgic feels. If you didn't grow up with those consoles, then you're going to want to avoid Beholgar because it just doesn't bring much else to the table. But if you're down for some camp and a little bit of torture, then give Beholgar a shot. I mean, do you want to live forever?